They called me 41 times in 4 days. 41. My mother, my sister Rochelle, my uncle Darnell, 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to since the Obama administration. All calling, all urgent, all acting like 7 years of silence had been some kind of misunderstanding I should be gracious enough to overlook. Here's what none of them knew. By the time those calls started coming in, I had already seen the GoFundMe. I had already read every comment, and I had already decided exactly what I was going to do about it. They thought they were calling me for help. They were actually calling to hand me the end of a story I'd been waiting years to finish.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. My name is Camille Okafor. I'm 37 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the West End neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. I have a dog named Ida, a coffee maker that grinds its own beans because I decided 3 years ago that I had earned that, and a dining table I bought at an estate sale in Decatur for $60 that now seats 6 people every Sunday without fail. I want you to understand what Sunday dinners at my table look like before I tell you what my family tried to do. My friend Deja brings potato salad nobody asked for. Marcus, who manages the compliance office where I work, brings wine. His girlfriend Priya brings her homemade focaccia. My neighbor Gerald, different Gerald, good Gerald, always shows up last and always brings the exact right dessert. Nobody coordinates. It just works that way. We eat. We argue about things that don't matter. Somebody always stays too late. I never want them to leave. That is the life I built. I want you to hold on to that picture while I take you back to where I started. It was a Sunday morning in March. I was at my kitchen counter with a mug of coffee still in my bonnet, going through my email before church, when my phone started buzzing. First one call, then another, then 3 more in a row from numbers I didn't recognize. Memphis area codes. I set my coffee down. I knew those numbers the way you know a smell, the way certain things live in your body long after your mind has moved on. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family in 7 years. Not one call, not one text. 7 years. And now, on a Sunday morning in March, my phone was lighting up like someone had pulled a fire alarm. I didn't answer. I turned my phone face down on the counter, finished my coffee, got dressed, and went to church. But I knew, the way you always know when something is coming, that whatever this was, it had already started. Let me take you back to Thanksgiving. Memphis, Tennessee. My mother's house on Sycamore Court, the brick ranch with the magnolia tree in the front yard, and the good china that only came out twice a year. Thanksgiving and Easter. Both times felt like auditions. My mother, Vivian Okafor, is the kind of woman who can make you feel proud and stupid at the same time. She walks into a room and adjusts it. She has a gift for making other people's failures feel like personal disappointments she has graciously chosen not to discuss. Growing up, that gift was mostly pointed at me. I was 28 at the time. I'd been working at a logistics company downtown for 3 years, handling freight compliance. I was good at my job. I was working toward a grant management certification at night. I had a savings account with actual money in it, which felt like a miracle given that I had been supporting myself since I was 19. My sister Rochelle was 26. She had just been promoted to assistant marketing director at an insurance firm. Same salary, new title, but our mother talked about it like Rochelle had been elected to something. The table had 16 people at it that year. My grandmother Ida's old china, the set with the blue flowers around the rim, plates my grandmother used to wash by hand and put away like they were sacred, which to her they were. My mother stood at the head of the table. "I want to take a moment," she said, and the room went quiet, because that is what rooms do when Vivian Okafor wants a moment. She raised her glass toward Rochelle, to my baby girl who is going places, who is making this family proud every single day. 16 people raised their glasses. I raised mine too. I smiled. I did what I always did, which was perform being fine. Nobody asked what I was working on. Nobody asked about the certification program. Nobody asked how the new apartment was coming along. I was wallpaper in my mother's house. I had been wallpaper my whole life. But I had come to that dinner with one question, a simple one, and I had decided to ask it. I waited until dessert. My grandmother Ida passed when I was 25. She was 79, sharp until the end, and she was the only person in my family who had ever looked at me like I was somebody. 2 years before she passed, she sat me down at her kitchen table. She held my hands across the plastic tablecloth, and she told me that she had set aside money, $12,000. She had written it into a letter, filed it with her affairs. She told me clearly, "This money is for you, Camille, for your future. Nobody touches this but you." I believed her. She had never once given me a reason not to. So at Thanksgiving, when the dessert plates were being cleared, and the conversation had softened into that particular after-dinner hum, I turned to my mother and I said quietly, "Mama, I wanted to ask about Grandma Ida's letter, the money she set aside for me. Is that something I need to contact someone about, or did it come through the estate?" The table did not go quiet gradually. It went quiet all at once, the kind of quiet that tells you something just changed, that cannot be unchanged. My mother set her fork down slowly. She folded her hands the way she does when she is preparing a performance. She looked at me first, then at every single person at that table. And when she spoke, her voice was silk over gravel. "Camille, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "I'm a little concerned. You've been asking some unusual questions lately. I've been noticing some things." She looked around the table with her eyes soft and worried. "I think some of us have been noticing." Several heads nodded. I counted them, 6. I said, "I just asked about Grandma Ida's money." "I know what you asked." Her voice did not change. "And I'm telling you how that question sounds. It sounds like someone who isn't doing well." My Aunt Lorraine, my mother's sister, reached over and patted my wrist. I excused myself. I went to the kitchen and started washing dishes. This is what I've learned about kitchens. People forget you're in them. The water was running. I was scrubbing a pot. And through the pass-through between the kitchen and the dining room, I could hear my mother's voice drop to the register she uses when she wants to be overheard by the right people, but not the wrong ones. She was talking to Aunt Lorraine. "That money went to Rochelle's venue deposit," she said, "and some of it handled a situation with her cards. You know, Rochelle had that rough patch last spring." Lorraine said something I couldn't catch. "Camille doesn't need it," my mother said. "She never follows through on anything. What was I supposed to do, let it sit there?" I turned the faucet off. I stood there with my hands in the dishwater, and I stayed very, very still. $12,000. My grandmother had held my hands across her kitchen table and told me that money was mine. She had gone to the trouble of writing it down. She had filed it properly. She had made me a promise with her hands around my hands, and she had meant every word of it. And my mother had taken it. Not because she needed it, not because of some genuine emergency, but because Rochelle wanted a nice venue, and because my mother had decided that I didn't follow through on anything anyway. So what was the point? I dried my hands. I walked back into the dining room. I said, "That money was mine. Grandma wrote it down herself." My mother turned to me with the expression she reserves for situations she has already decided to win. "Camille, we are not doing this at the table." "We're not at the table. I'm standing in the doorway." "You are making a scene." "I'm asking about money that was left to me by my grandmother." She stood up, and I knew what was coming next. She called everyone into the living room. 16 people shuffled out of the dining room and arranged themselves in a loose semicircle. My mother stood in the center of it, hands clasped, expression grieved. This was not improvised. I want to be clear about that. The speed with which she assembled her audience and shifted into that posture was the speed of someone executing a rehearsed move. "I have been carrying something," she said, "and I think, for everyone's sake, it needs to be addressed." She talked about how she had noticed changes in me, how she had been worried for months, how she had been quietly trying to protect me while simultaneously protecting the family from having to worry. She gestured toward me. I watched my father, Reggie. He was in the armchair by the window, elbows on his knees looking at the carpet. He was a quiet man who had learned a long time ago that silence was easier. He said nothing. My brother Terrence was leaning against the wall. He looked at our mother, then at me, then at the floor. Rochelle was on the couch, phone in her hand, thumb moving. Not one person in that room said, "Camille, are you okay?" Not one person said, "Vivian, hold on." I excused myself. I went upstairs to the room I used to sleep in before I got my own place. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I thought about my grandmother's kitchen table and her hands around mine, and her voice saying, "This is for you. Nobody touches this but you." And then I thought, I cannot keep coming back here and expecting something different to happen. I went to the closet. There was an overnight bag I had left there from a prior visit. I packed it in about 11 minutes. I came back downstairs. My mother's voice followed me to the front door. "If you walk out of this house right now, Camille." I opened the door. The November air hit me and I stepped out into it. I did not slam the door. I closed it behind me the way you close something when you know you are not coming back. Quietly, with both hands. I had $97 in my wallet. My debit card had about $400 in the account. I drove to a Goodwill on Summer Avenue and bought a winter coat for $38, the kind with the zip-out lining. Then I drove to the Greyhound station on Airways Boulevard. I did not know exactly where I was going. I knew I was going somewhere that was not Memphis. The cheapest ticket to a city I had never lived in, but had heard good things about, was to Atlanta, Georgia. $42, 7 hours. I bought it. I sat on that bus with my overnight bag between my feet and my coat in my lap, and I watched Tennessee turn into Georgia in the dark. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the kitchen. I thought about my mother's hands clasped in the center of the living room, while 16 people stood around her and not one of them looked at me like I was worth worrying about. Here is what nobody tells you about leaving. It is not like the movies. There is no swelling music. There is no clear moment where you feel brave. You just feel cold and tired and like you made a decision you cannot unmake. And you sit with that in a bus seat that smells like old upholstery while the highway passes outside the window, and somewhere behind you, the people who were supposed to love you are already working on the story they are going to tell about why you left. I arrived in Atlanta at 5:30 in the morning. That was the last time I had contact with my family for 7 years. I'm not going to spend a long time on the building years because the point is not the struggle. The point is what the struggle built. Here is what the first year looked like. A women's transitional shelter in Southwest Atlanta for 3 weeks. Then a room in a shared house in College Park, $350 a month, 4 women sharing 1 bathroom. Then a temp position, answering phones at a workforce development nonprofit called Corlin Group, where I made $14 an hour and worked 45 hours a week and never complained once. I passed my grants compliance certification on the 2nd attempt. The first time, I failed the financial reporting module by 4 points. I went home, ate rice and canned beans, and studied that module for 8 more days. Then I went back and passed it by 22 points. At Corlin Group, I reorganized the client filing system in my 2nd week. Nobody asked me to. The chaos made it hard to do my job, so I fixed it. My supervisor, a woman named Beverly, stopped by my desk on a Thursday afternoon and looked at what I had done. "Who told you to do this?" she said. "Nobody. I just couldn't find anything." She pulled up a chair. What else do you see that needs fixing? Within 8 months, I was managing 3 grant cycles simultaneously. Within 2 years, I was leading the compliance team. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in East Point. I bought a real bed. I opened a savings account and set up automatic deposits. I did not have a plan to become successful. I had a plan to never feel powerless again. Everything that came after that was a side effect. Here is the other thing that was happening during those years, the thing I could not control. Back in Memphis, my mother was filing her version of me. I learned this later, piece by piece, from sources I will tell you about. But I will tell you now so you understand the architecture. Within 2 months of my leaving, Vivian Okafor had told her church friends that I had gone through some kind of episode and needed space to recover. She was vague about the details, which was intentional. Vagueness is more useful than specifics in a community that will fill in the blanks with whatever they fear most. My brother Terrence posted online twice that year. Vague things, prayers for people who make hard choices. Family is not about convenience. Each post got dozens of responses. Each one was about me. Rochelle moved into my old apartment and signed a new lease. She sold a few pieces of furniture I had left in storage. She told the management company I had abandoned the unit. My father, Reggie, told neighbors he just hoped I was safe wherever I was. He said it with the right amount of worry in his face. He did not call me once. For 7 years, I was the cautionary tale Vivian Okafor carried into every room. The troubled daughter, the one who went off. She never had to say anything directly. She just had to seem pained, and people would do the rest. I was a ghost in a story I did not write, and they were comfortable with that. 2 years after I left Memphis, my cousin Tanya found me. Tanya is my mother's sister, Lorraine's youngest daughter. She is about 3 years older than me, and she was the one person in that family I had actually liked growing up. She found my email through LinkedIn, sent me a message that was careful and short, and said she had been thinking about me. I wrote back. I did not open a door, but I cracked a window. Over the next few months, Tanya and I exchanged messages. She was cautious with what she shared. I was cautious with what I offered, but it felt like something real. The first real thing from that direction in 2 years. And then Tanya mentioned in passing that my mother had been asking about me, that she seemed to miss me, that things had been different since I left. I sat with that for a long time. I made a decision I have since reconsidered. I wrote my mother a short message, 4 sentences. I said I was doing well. I said I was living in Atlanta. I said I was open to a conversation someday if she was willing to be honest about what happened. Her response came within a few hours. It was warm, warmer than I expected. She said she had missed me every day. She said she wanted to rebuild. She asked if I would be open to calling. I felt something shift in my chest that I did not know how to name at the time. I told her I would think about it. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a Facebook post. It was my mother. The post said something like, "We have been praying for healing in our family. Happy to say that we are taking steps in the right direction. Our daughter is home in our hearts, even when she is far away. So grateful." She had not spoken to me. We had exchanged 4 messages. I had not agreed to anything. I had not said I was coming home. I had not said we were reconciling. But she had taken 4 sentences and turned them into a public announcement of family restoration, with herself at the center of it, gracious and forgiving and motherly. The comments were everything you would expect. "So glad to hear this. You are such a strong woman, Vivian. Praying for continued healing." I read the post twice. I closed the app. I blocked her profile. I did not write back to Tanya for a while. I learned something that day that I should have already known. My mother did not want a relationship with me. She wanted the image of one. She wanted the story of reconciliation without the inconvenience of actually changing. And the moment I gave her 4 sentences, she turned them into a prop. I filed that lesson in the part of my brain where I keep things I should not need to learn twice. The next morning, I went to work, sat at my desk, and did my job. That evening, I made dinner. I cleaned my kitchen. I sat on my couch with Ida, who was not yet my dog, but would be in another year, and I watched television I can't now remember. Here's the thing nobody tells you about losing hope. It does not feel like devastation. Not always. Sometimes it just feels like setting something down that was too heavy to carry and walking away from it without looking back. I had let myself wonder for a few weeks whether something different was possible, whether my mother had thought about things and arrived somewhere new, whether the woman who stood in that living room and performed concern for an audience of 16 could also be someone capable of honesty. She could not. Or maybe she was capable and chose not to be. I am not sure that distinction matters. What I know is that I closed the window I had cracked, and I did not open it again. I stopped checking that particular corner of the internet. I put Tanya's messages in a folder and left them there. I kept working. I kept saving. I made friends who became something closer than friends over time. I moved into the West End apartment in my 4th year in Atlanta. I got Ida from a rescue organization. I found the estate sale table. I started hosting Sunday dinners. Life, actual life, kept going. I want to be specific about that because I think people sometimes imagine that estrangement is a constant ache. Like you are always thinking about the people you left. Like every good thing is shadowed by the absence. That is not how it was for me. Not after the first couple of years. My life was full. My life was mine. I was not numb, and I was not healed, and I was not avoiding the subject. I just had things to do, and people who actually showed up, and a dog who needed walking twice a day, and somewhere in the routine of real living, the ache became a low hum, and eventually even that faded most of the time, until that Sunday morning in March when the Memphis area code started calling. I was Senior Grants Compliance Manager at a firm called Aldridge Community Partners. We helped nonprofits and municipal agencies apply for federal and foundation funding. I had been there for 4 years and had been promoted twice. My team had a 91% grant approval rate over the prior fiscal year. I mention that because it matters later. The Sunday the calls started, I ignored them. Monday morning, I sat at my desk with my coffee and looked at the missed calls log on my phone. 23 calls over the weekend. Different numbers. All Memphis. I did not call back. I Googled myself instead. This is something I do occasionally for professional reasons. When you work in grants and your name is attached to funding announcements, you need to know what comes up when people search for you. My name came up as it usually did. LinkedIn. A conference speaker profile from a nonprofit summit in 2023, our firm staff page, and then, on the second page of results, something I did not recognize. A GoFundMe page. I clicked it. The title was, Help the Okafor Family Heal. I read the first paragraph. Then I read it again. Then I pushed back from my desk, stood up and walked to the window and stood there for a full minute looking at the Atlanta skyline without seeing any of it. Here is what the page said, in language I am paraphrasing because I'm not going to reproduce it exactly. It said that a family in Memphis had experienced a painful estrangement from their daughter and sister. It said that this family member had left following what it described, and I want to be precise here, as a mental health episode that the family had tried to support her through. It said that this family member was now living out of state, that they had not been able to reach her, and that they were hoping to raise funds to attend family therapy sessions and potentially travel to reconnect with her. It used my full name, Camille Okafor. It linked to my professional LinkedIn profile as evidence of where I was living. It had been shared 214 times. It had raised $4,320. I scrolled the comments. Most of them were from strangers who had seen it shared somewhere. Prayers for your family. Hope she gets the help she needs. You are doing the right thing by never giving up on her. And then, about 40 comments down, I saw a name I recognized. A woman named Sandra Phelps, who had attended a grants conference I spoke at in Savannah the prior spring. She had written, "I actually know this woman professionally. I had no idea she was going through something like this, wishing the family healing." I sat down. Sandra was connected to people I worked with. She sat on the board of 2 organizations that our firm had pending grant applications with. I picked up my phone and called my friend Deja. She picked up on the first ring. "I was just about to call you," she said. Deja had seen the GoFundMe 4 days earlier. She is my colleague and one of my closest friends. She handles communications at Aldridge, which means she monitors mentions of the firm and anyone associated with it. My name attached to something called Help the Okafor Family Heal was enough to send a notification to her dashboard. She had not come to me immediately because she had wanted to confirm what she was looking at first. She had shown it to our director Marcus on Friday afternoon, not to cause trouble, but because she recognized that if something was being published about a colleague that was potentially defamatory, the firm needed to know. Marcus had put it in an email marked confidential. Deja told me all of this in a single breath, and when she finished, she said, "I screenshotted everything, high resolution, before they could take anything down." I said, "How long has it been up?" "At least 2 weeks, maybe more. It's been shared across 3 or 4 Facebook groups." I closed my eyes. 2 weeks. The calls to my phone had started 4 days ago, which meant they had launched a public campaign using my name and my story before they even tried to contact me directly. They had spent 2 weeks collecting money and sympathy, and I had not even known it was happening. "Deja," I said, "send me everything you have." She sent me 19 screenshots within the next 10 minutes, the GoFundMe page, the sharing posts, a Facebook group thread where someone had posted it under the caption, "Please pray for this mama trying to get her daughter back." The comments on that thread, including Sandra Phelps' comment and 2 others from people tangentially connected to my professional network. I sat at my desk and looked at all of it for a long time. Then I called an attorney. My friend Marcus had a colleague, an attorney named Renee, who did media and defamation work. I had her on the phone within the hour. I walked her through the GoFundMe. I sent her the screenshots while we were talking. I told her about the mental health episode framing, about my name being used without consent, about the connection to my professional identity. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. "The mental health episode language attached to your legal name and linked to your professional profile," she said. "That is potentially defamatory in a professional context, especially given that it's categorically false and that it's already reaching people in your professional network. What can we do? I can draft a cease and desist to the GoFundMe platform and to whoever created the page. Given the professional exposure, I would recommend moving quickly." The cease and desist went out that evening. She sent it to the platform with documentation of the professional harm and the false characterization. She also sent it directly to the email address associated with the GoFundMe account, which was my mother's. The GoFundMe was taken down 48 hours later. But something else happened in those 48 hours. My sister Rochelle, who I would later learn had been the one to actually set up the page, got the cease and desist and panicked. She deleted the GoFundMe. She deleted several of the Facebook posts. She deleted the sharing thread. She did it fast, but Deja had already taken the screenshots, most of them. Deja had captured 19 screenshots on Friday. By the time the GoFundMe came down on Tuesday, Rochelle had deleted things Deja had not yet gotten to. Specifically, there was a second post, a longer one, that Rochelle had written in a private Facebook group for people who had experienced estrangement from family members. In that post, Rochelle had written in detail about what she described as my decline. She had named the company I worked for. She had described, in language designed to seem caring, a series of behaviors that she claimed to have witnessed during what she called my last bad episode. None of it was true. None of it had happened. Deja had seen it, had flagged it to come back to, but had not gotten the screenshot before it was deleted. The group is private, Deja told me. I was only in it because a friend added me to it years ago for a completely different reason. I did not anticipate needing to preserve that specific post. I sat with that. Here's the thing about losing a piece of evidence. It makes you evaluate what you actually have and what you actually need. What I had was the GoFundMe screenshots, the main sharing posts, and Sandra Phelps' comment. I had documentation of the professional reach. I had the cease and desist, which established a legal record. What I did not have was the private group post. Renee, my attorney, said I could potentially pursue the private group post through discovery if I wanted to file a civil suit. It would take time, money, and emotional energy. Or, she said, I could use what I had and do something else. I thought about it for the rest of that day. I thought about what I actually wanted. Not theoretically, concretely. I did not want a lawsuit. I did not want money. I did not want to spend the next 18 months deposing my mother and my sister in a courtroom. What I wanted was a record. My record, in my voice, sent directly to every person in my family who had participated in this. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop, and I wrote an email. I sent it to 6 addresses: my mother, my father Reggie, my sister Rochelle, my brother Terrence, and my Aunt Lorraine, who I knew had been involved in sharing the GoFundMe at least once based on a comment Deja had captured. I copied my attorney Renee. I did not write a long email. I wrote a precise one. I said, I'm aware of the GoFundMe that was created using my name, my professional identity, and a false description of my mental health history. I have attached legal documentation of the cease and desist and platform removal. I have documented the professional reach of the campaign, including the names of colleagues and professional contacts who encountered it. I said, I want to be direct about what happened before I left Memphis and why I left. In November of 2018, I asked my mother about the $12,000 my grandmother Ida designated for me in a written letter. I was told I was being dramatic. I later learned that money had been redirected to cover my sister Rochelle's expenses. I am attaching a copy of my grandmother's letter. I had kept it, 7 years in a wooden box I had carried from Memphis to my first Atlanta apartment, to every apartment since. My grandmother's handwriting, round and careful, her full name signed at the bottom. The letter named me. It named the amount. It was dated and witnessed. I attached a photograph of it. I said, I'm not asking for the money. I am not pursuing legal action at this time. I am stating a record so that no one in this family can claim uncertainty about what happened or why I made the choices I made. I said, I do not plan to respond to calls, texts, or further emails. If any member of this family wishes to have an honest conversation, with the word honest meaning that someone acknowledges out loud, specifically what they did and what it cost me, I am willing to hear that, not a general apology, not we did our best, not family is family, specific, named, honest. Until then, I have nothing further to say. I sent it on a Tuesday morning at 8:54. I closed my laptop and went to my 9 o'clock meeting. I'm going to tell you what happened in that family over the next several weeks because Deja kept me informed, and because Tanya, my cousin, reached back out after 7 years of near silence and told me the rest. Lorraine, my aunt, called my mother the same day I sent the email. According to Tanya, who was in the room, Lorraine said she had not known about the mental health episode framing. She had thought the GoFundMe was about reaching out. She had not known my name was being used in connection with language like that. My mother told her she was overreacting. Lorraine said she would not be coming to the family Easter gathering. That was the first crack. Lorraine was the person my mother had always counted on to reflect her story back to her as reasonable. Without Lorraine doing that, the story had one fewer mirror. Rochelle did not respond to my email directly. What she did instead was tell several mutual acquaintances that I was still clearly struggling and that the email proved it. She told at least one person that I had threatened legal action against my own family and that she felt afraid. Tanya heard this and texted me. "She's saying you threatened her. I want you to know I don't believe that." I sent Tanya a copy of the email. She went quiet for about 20 minutes. Then she wrote, "Camille, I'm sorry. Terrence, my brother, did not call. He did not email. 3 weeks after I sent the message, he sent me a text. It was 2 words, 'I'm sorry.' No period, no follow-up. I read it at my desk on a Thursday afternoon. I set my phone down. I finished the grant report I was working on. I drove home, cooked dinner, let Ida outside, watched television, and went to sleep. The next morning I woke up and went to work. My father, Reggie, wrote me a letter, not an email. A letter, on paper, mailed to my office. I do not know how he got the address, but he found it. His handwriting was slow and careful, the handwriting of a man who does not write letters and had to think about every word. He said, "Camille, I don't know if I have the right to put any of this on you, but I need to say it anyway. I am sorry for every time I sat in that chair and said nothing. For every time I told you to be patient with your mother when I should have told your mother to stop. I was not keeping the peace. I was keeping my own comfort. That is not the same thing. You deserved a father who stood up when it was loud. I never did. I will carry that. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not ask me to call. I read the letter twice. I folded it. I put it in the wooden box next to my grandmother's letter. I have not written back. I do not know yet if I will." My mother did not respond to my email. What she did, she removed me from family photographs on social media. She posted a prayer request that said something about trials that test us and the peace that comes from releasing what we cannot control. Several women from her church commented with encouragement, but something had shifted in her social world, and I think she felt it. Lorraine stopped returning her calls. 2 of Lorraine's daughters, who were in the same church women's ministry as my mother, had seen the GoFundMe and asked questions my mother could not answer without contradiction. The mental health episode framing had reached people who had professional knowledge, meaning at least one person who worked in social work, and quietly told several others that the language was not consistent with someone describing a genuine mental health situation. It was consistent with someone running a narrative. In a community that runs on reputation and Sunday morning eye contact, that is a significant thing to have circulating. My mother had spent 7 years telling a story about me. The story required me to be absent and silent. The moment I sent one email with one attached document, the story began to require maintenance she had not anticipated. She could not explain the letter. She could not explain why she had not mentioned it. She could not explain why, if she had been worried about my well-being for 7 years, the first thing she did when she found out I had a professional career was set up a fundraising page rather than simply calling me and apologizing. People in her world did not ask these questions out loud. That is not how communities like hers work. But they stopped nodding the way they had been nodding. They started being politely busy when she called. She still had the house on Sycamore Court. She still had the china and the magnolia tree in the front yard. But some rooms in her world had become smaller, and she had done that herself, and she knew it, and there was nothing to do about it now. My sister Rochelle had been the whole point of the GoFundMe, though she would never say that directly. What Tanya told me, and I believe this because it fits everything I know about how my family operates, Rochelle was in trouble financially. She had been for a while. A difficult divorce 2 years prior had left her with a mortgage she could not manage alone. She had been relying on my mother to co-sign a loan modification, but my mother's credit was in worse shape than anyone had acknowledged publicly. Someone had searched my name online. Tanya was not sure who first, but someone had found my LinkedIn profile and shown my mother, and my mother's first response had not been relief or joy. It had been, Tanya said, a sharp and complicated silence. Because if I was a COO of a real firm, if I had a career and a professional profile and conference speaking credits, then the story my mother had been telling for 7 years collapsed. The GoFundMe was not about family healing. It was about finding a way to reach me that would make me feel guilty enough to help. The mental health framing was not a mistake. It was a tool. If people believed I had struggled, if they believed my family had been patient and worried and prayerful, then when I appeared and was asked for something, saying no would make me look ungrateful, unstable, still not right. They needed me to feel like I owed them something before I had a chance to remember what they owed me. After the GoFundMe was taken down, after my email went out, Rochelle's loan situation became unworkable. The co-signer option fell through. The bank moved forward with the process it had already started. Tanya told me that Rochelle moved back into the house on Sycamore Court, into my old room. I did not respond to that information for a long moment. Then I said, "Is the mark still on the wall by the closet, where I used to measure my height every birthday?" Tanya said she didn't know. I said, "She never built anything that was actually hers. Everything was set up for her, and when the setup came down, there was nothing underneath it. I was not happy about it. I want to be clear. I know what it feels like to have nowhere to go. I would not wish that feeling on someone I disliked, let alone a sister I had once been close to in the way siblings are close when they are small and the world has not yet sorted them into roles. What I felt was something sadder than satisfaction. I felt the particular grief of watching someone who could have been different, who could have chosen at any one of several moments to be honest or to be kind, arrive at a consequence that might have been avoided if they had. Rochelle never apologized. Tanya said she was telling people that if I had just helped, none of this would have happened. Still pointing. Still a daughter of Vivian Okafor. But Tanya also said that one evening she had walked past the door of my old room and found Rochelle standing in the middle of it, running one finger along a nail hole in the wall, just standing there, not saying anything, looking at the small, round mark in the drywall where I had once hung a photograph of my grandmother. She stood there for a long time. I do not know what that means. I'm not sure it means anything, but I think about it sometimes. I keep my father's letter in the wooden box. The box my grandmother sent with me the last time I saw her, 2 years before she died, packed with things she wanted me to have. A strand of freshwater pearls, a photograph of me at 6 years old with a gap in my front teeth, grinning at the camera, a small card in her handwriting that said, "You are exactly who I hoped you would be. Keep going." I kept the box for 7 years without opening it. Carried it from Memphis to every apartment I lived in. Kept it on my nightstand. Did not open it for a long time because opening it meant accepting that she was really gone and that she had been the only person in that family who loved me without conditions. My friend Deja was the one who finally sat with me while I opened it, about a year after I moved to Atlanta. She did not say anything dramatic. She just sat there, and I opened it, and I held the pearls, and looked at the photograph and read the card, and neither of us made a big deal about it. My grandmother's letter is in there now, too. The one about the money, and my father's letter on the paper with the careful handwriting. 3 documents in a wooden box. One from a woman who loved me and told the truth, and set something aside for me that was taken away before I ever got it. One that proved it was taken. One from a man who sat in a chair for decades, saying nothing, and finally, too late, found some words. I read my father's letter sometimes, not often, on certain nights when the apartment is quiet and Ida is asleep and I am sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of wine. I do not know if I will write back. I am not rushing the decision. The decision will be ready when it is ready, and I have learned in 7 years of building a life out of nothing that the things worth doing are usually the things you do when you are actually ready and not 1 minute before. 3 months later, a Sunday evening in June, my apartment, West End, Atlanta. The windows are open because it is warm enough to have the windows open, and I have spent enough winters in my life being cold to take genuine pleasure in warmth. Deja is arguing with Marcus about whether hot sauce belongs on cornbread. The answer is yes, obviously, and I've already told them both this, and they are ignoring me, which is something my friends do because they know I am right, and they need to perform disagreement for a little while before they arrive at accepting it. Priya is on my couch with a glass of wine, telling a story about a grant proposal that went sideways in spectacular fashion. Gerald from next door is setting the table. He brought peach cobbler that is still warm from the oven. Ida is underfoot, moving between people, performing the particular optimism of a dog who believes that proximity to food preparation will eventually pay off. I am at the stove stirring a pot of butter beans. I look around the table when we sit down. 6 chairs mismatched. Plates that do not all match. $12 wine that nobody is pretending is better than it is. People who are here because they want to be, not because their name appears on a family tree, not because of obligation, not because they need something from me. I think about another table, longer, with my grandmother's china, 16 people and a toast that was not for me, and 15 pairs of eyes that told me, in the language that families speak without speaking, that I was not the point. This table is smaller. The plates do not match. I have never felt more like myself. My mother has not reached out since the GoFundMe came down. Rochelle has not contacted me. Terrence sent 2 words and I have not responded. My father's letter is in the wooden box. The door is not locked. It is not open either. It is just there, the way a door can be when you are no longer afraid of it. If someone knocks with something real, I will decide then. A real knock sounds specific. It sounds like a name said out loud and a thing done to that name acknowledged directly and an apology that does not begin with if you felt hurt. It sounds like a person who has thought about it long enough to say it clearly. Until that knock comes. If it comes, I have this table. I have Deja winning the hot sauce argument because I back her up and the vote is now 3-1. I have Marcus pretending to be annoyed about the cornbread while eating a second piece. I have Ida finally abandoning optimism and lying down under the table with a sigh. I have butter beans and peach cobbler and windows open in June. I have a life that belongs to me. My grandmother sat me down at her kitchen table and held my hands and told me my future was mine. Nobody can touch it but you. Somebody tried to touch it. They failed. And I am here at this table with these people on this Sunday evening in June. That is enough. That has always been enough. I just had to build the table first. If you have been the one they pointed at, the one they named without your permission, the one they handed a story you never agreed to carry, I want you to hear this directly. You are not what they said. The words they use when they are losing control of you are not a diagnosis. They are a description of their own panic. You are allowed to set the story down. You are allowed to build a different table. And if someone from your past ever reaches out with 41 calls and a GoFundMe and a narrative designed to make you feel like you owe them something before you've had a chance to remember what they owe you, I hope you have 19 screenshots, a good attorney, and a friend named Deja who got there first. My name is Camille Okafor. I am 37 years old. The most valuable thing I own is not my title or my salary or my grant approval rate. It is the silence I can finally afford to sit in without someone else's voice filling it. My grandmother told me to keep going. I did. That's my story. If you made it this far, I want to ask you one thing. If your family called you tomorrow after years of silence, what do you think they'd say? Those 2 words, help me? Or the 2 words that actually mean something? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you recognize any piece of this, If you have ever been handed a role you did not audition for and punished for refusing to play it, I hope this gave you something. Even if it is just the knowledge that someone else built the table from scratch and it turned out fine, better than fine. Thank you for listening.